The dust from the mail coach had barely settled when Abigail Oliver's stomach plummeted like a stone in a well. The letter clutched in her trembling hands suddenly felt like a burning coal, and the Colorado Territory's vast landscape, which had seemed so full of promise just moments before, now stretched before her like a prison yard. She couldn't go through with it. Not now. Not like this. "Miss, you all right there?" The stagecoach driver peered down at her with concern etched across his weathered face. "Concord's just over that ridge. We'll be there in 20 minutes." Abigail swallowed hard, her throat dry from the journey and the mounting panic. "I've made a terrible mistake," she whispered, more to herself than to him. 3 weeks ago, in the cramped tenement she'd shared with 5 other factory girls in Boston, becoming a mail-order bride had seemed the only escape from the deafening machines, choking textile dust, and the foreman's wandering hands. Lukas Quinn's advertisement had been straightforward: rancher seeking wife, promises comfortable home, respectful treatment. The miniature daguerreotype showed a man with kind eyes and a strong jaw. She'd responded, and they'd exchanged a handful of letters. It had all seemed so simple then. "Miss Oliver." A young girl's voice broke through her thoughts. Abigail looked up to see a girl of perhaps 13 standing beside the now stopped stagecoach. She wore a simple calico dress, her blonde hair in 2 practical braids, and despite her youth, there was something commanding in her stance. "You're early," the girl said, not unkindly. "Pa's still out with the herd. I'm Ellie Quinn." Abigail started, clutching her carpetbag tighter. "I'm not sure I can." Ellie's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're having second thoughts." Abigail nodded miserably. "I shouldn't have come. This was impulsive and foolish, but we need you anyway," Ellie said firmly, interrupting Abigail's spiral of doubt. "Come on. At least come to the ranch, have something to eat and rest. You can make your decisions after that." Something in the girl's tone, not pleading, but practical determination, gave Abigail pause. "Why would you need me if I'm not marrying your father?" Ellie looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at the stagecoach driver who was unloading Abigail's trunk. "Because we're drowning, Miss Oliver, and Pa's too proud to admit it. Drowning. I've been running the house since Ma died 3 years ago." "I'm doing my best," but Ellie's voice caught. "The ranch needs a woman's touch, even if it's just for a while, and I need—" She trailed off, squaring her shoulders. "Well, it doesn't matter what I need, but we could use your help, even temporary." Abigail felt her resistance wavering. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not imposing if you're invited." Ellie gestured to a wagon parked nearby. "And Pa doesn't need to know right away that you've changed your mind. Give it a few days. If you still want to leave after that, I'll drive you back to town myself." Against her better judgment, Abigail found herself nodding. "Just a few days," she agreed, "to help out." As they drove toward the Quinn Ranch, the mountains of Colorado's Front Range loomed majestically in the distance. It was April 1875, and patches of snow still clung to the higher elevations despite the warmth beginning to settle over the valley. "It's beautiful here," Abigail admitted, watching a pair of hawks circle overhead. "Most days," Ellie agreed. "Though it can be harsh too." She pointed to the west. "That's our land, stretching from the creek up to those foothills. 2,000 acres. Abigail's eyes widened. "That's enormous. And not enough, according to Pa. The big cattle outfits keep pushing in. There's talk of barbed wire coming." Ellie handled the reins with practiced ease. "Pa says a man needs room to breathe out here." "And what do you think?" Ellie looked surprised at the question. I think." She paused. "I think it's not about the amount of land but what you do with it, and who you share it with." They crested a small rise, and below them, nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees along a creek, sat a large log home with several outbuildings. A barn, corrals, a bunkhouse, and a small garden plot completed the picture. "Home," Ellie said simply. As they approached, Abigail noticed the details. The sagging porch that needed repair, the overgrown garden, the single curtainless window. Signs of a place where survival took precedence over comfort. "It's not much to look at right now," Ellie admitted, following Abigail's gaze. "But it was nice once. It could be again." Inside, the house was clean but sparse. A large table dominated the main room with a stone fireplace at one end and a kitchen area at the other. Doorways led to what Abigail presumed were bedrooms. "I'll put you in here," Ellie said, showing her to a small room with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. "It was Ma's sewing room, but I cleared it out when Pa started writing to you." Abigail set down her carpetbag, guilt washing over her. "Ellie, I really don't think." A commotion outside interrupted her. Men's voices, the whinnying of horses, dogs barking. "That's Pa in the hands." Ellie's face tensed. "Listen, please don't tell him yet. Let him meet you first, then. Well, then we'll figure something out." Before Abigail could protest, Ellie was gone. Left alone in the small room, Abigail sank onto the bed, her head spinning. What had she gotten herself into? And how was she going to extricate herself without hurting this family that, despite their obvious struggles, had already shown her kindness? She had just enough time to wash her face in the basin provided and straighten her travel-wrinkled dress before heavy footsteps approached. "Ellie says our guest has arrived," came a deep voice, followed by a light knock. Abigail opened the door and found herself face to face with Lukas Quinn. The daguerreotype hadn't done him justice. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the summer sky, he was more handsome than she'd anticipated. His sandy hair was flecked with gray at the temples, and fine lines around his eyes suggested a man who squinted into the sun and perhaps laughed more than his current serious expression indicated. "Miss Oliver," he said formally, removing his hat. "Welcome to Concord Ranch." "Mr. Quinn," she managed, offering her hand. "Thank you for having me." His hand engulfed hers, calloused but gentle. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "Not at all," she lied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. This was not going according to plan. She was supposed to tell him immediately that she'd made a mistake, that she wasn't cut out for ranch life, that she'd be leaving on the next stagecoach east. Instead, she said, "Your daughter has been very kind." A flash of something pride perhaps crossed his face. "Ellie's a good girl." "Too good for her own sake sometimes." He cleared his throat. "We'll eat soon. Would you like to rest first or—" "Actually," Abigail said, seizing an opportunity, "I'd love to see the ranch if that's possible." Surprise registered on his face, followed by a cautious smile. "Of course. Though there's not much to see this time of year. The cattle are on the lower pastures, and we haven't started the spring planting yet." "I'd like to see it anyway," she insisted. Perhaps if she saw more of what this life would entail, her resolve to leave would strengthen. As Lukas showed her around the ranch, pointing out the corrals where they broke horses, the creek that never ran dry, the distant pastures where the cattle grazed, Abigail found herself both intimidated by the scope of the operation and oddly drawn to it. There was something honest about this place, no pretense, no artifice, just the raw reality of life carved from the wilderness. "It must be difficult," she said as they paused by the corral fence, "managing all this." Lukas studied her face. "It is, but it's a good life, hard but good." He looked out over his land. "I won't lie to you, Miss Oliver, we've had some rough years. Drought, low cattle prices, trouble with rustlers, but things are turning around." Abigail doubted that, given what Ellie had said and the state of the house, but she appreciated his attempt at optimism. "And Ellie?" she asked. "It can't be easy for her growing up out here without a mother." A shadow crossed his face. "No, it hasn't been. Catherine, my wife, she was the heart of this place when the fever took her." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. Ellie stepped up. "Too much, too young. That's part of why I wrote that advertisement." His honesty surprised her. "To find a mother for her. And a partner for me," he added quietly. "I don't expect miracles, Miss Oliver, just someone willing to build something alongside me." The sincerity in his voice made Abigail's planned rejection stick in her throat. How could she tell him now that she'd already decided to leave? As if sensing her discomfort, he changed the subject. "Tell me about Boston. Your letters mentioned you worked in a textile factory." "For 7 years," she confirmed. "Since I was 16, after my parents died." "That must have been difficult too in its own way." Abigail thought of the relentless machines, the 12-hour days, the cramped living conditions. "It was confining. I thought coming west might offer more freedom." "And now that you're here?" His eyes were keen, searching her face. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm still deciding." Dinner that evening was a simple but hearty affair: beef stew, cornbread, and preserved peaches. 2 ranch hands joined them: Aaron, an older man with a perpetual squint, and Miguel, a young Mexican cowboy with a quick smile. Ellie had clearly gone to extra effort, using the good dishes and even finding a slightly bedraggled bunch of early wildflowers for the table. The conversation flowed more easily than Abigail had expected. Lukas asked thoughtful questions about her life in the East, and she found herself sharing stories she hadn't thought about in years: her father's bookshop, before he lost it in the panic of '73. Her mother's talent for turning meager ingredients into delicious meals. In turn, she learned more about the ranch and its inhabitants. How Lukas had come to Colorado in '58 during the gold rush, but found his fortune in cattle instead. How he and Catherine had built the house together, log by log. How Ellie had been born during a blizzard so fierce the doctor couldn't make it, and Catherine had endured with only a midwife's help. As the evening progressed, Abigail found herself relaxing, drawn in by their easy camaraderie and simple dignity. When Ellie began clearing the dishes, Abigail rose to help. "You don't need to do that," Lukas protested. "You're our guest tonight." "Nonsense," Abigail replied. "I'm not one to sit idle while others work." In the kitchen area, as they washed and dried the dishes together, Ellie whispered, "See, you fit right in." Abigail frowned. "Ellie, I don't want to mislead you or your father. I really did come here intending to stay, but what changed your mind?" the girl asked, genuinely curious. Abigail considered the question. "I think I got scared. Leaving everything familiar, marrying a stranger, living in a place so different from what I know, it's overwhelming." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "When Ma died, I was scared every day. Still am sometimes. But Pa says courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs doing anyway." "Your father seems like a wise man." "He is," Ellie said firmly, "and a good one. He deserves." She trailed off, scrubbing a pot with more vigor than necessary. "He deserves someone who's sure," Abigail finished for her. "Not someone who'll run at the first challenge." Ellie looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. "Would you run at the first challenge?" Before Abigail could answer, Lukas appeared in the doorway. "Ellie, don't interrogate our guest." His tone was gentle but firm. "It's all right," Abigail assured him. "She's just being protective of you." Something softened in Lukas's expression as he looked at his daughter. "I'm the one who's supposed to do the protecting." Ellie rolled her eyes, but there was affection in the gesture. "Pa, Miss Oliver must be tired from her journey. Maybe you could show her that book of Colorado plants you have." She mentioned she's interested in gardening. Abigail hadn't mentioned any such thing, but she appreciated Ellie's attempt to create a connection between her and Lukas. The evening passed pleasantly, with Lukas showing Abigail his small collection of books, including the illustrated volume on native plants. As they talked, Abigail found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet intelligence and thoughtful manner. This was not a rough, uneducated frontiersman, but a man who had chosen this life deliberately and approached it with care and commitment. When she finally retired to her small room, Abigail's mind was in greater turmoil than ever. The prospect of leaving the next day, which had seemed so certain that morning, now filled her with a strange reluctance. There was something about this place, these people. But could she really stay? Marry a man she'd just met, no matter how appealing he might be? Take on the responsibility of a struggling ranch and a young girl who needed a mother? Sleep eluded her for hours as she weighed her options. By the time dawn streaked the sky with pink and gold, Abigail had made a decision of sorts. She would give herself 1 week. 1 week to see if this life was truly something she could embrace, or if her initial instinct to flee had been correct. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Lukas and the hands were out before sunrise, and Ellie was busy preparing breakfast when Abigail emerged from her room. "I thought I'd help you today," Abigail announced. "Show me what needs doing around the house." Ellie's face lit up. "Really? You're staying?" "For now," Abigail clarified. "I'll give it a week, see how things go. No promises beyond that." Ellie launched herself at Abigail, hugging her tightly. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand once you got here." Abigail gently disentangled herself. "I haven't decided anything permanently, Ellie, and we need to tell your father about my uncertainty." The girl's face fell. "But if you tell him now, he deserves honesty," Abigail said firmly. "I'll speak with him tonight." True to her word, Abigail threw herself into the day's chores, determined to understand what life on the ranch would truly entail. She helped Ellie with the washing, learned the intricacies of cooking on a wood stove, and began to tackle the neglected garden plot. By midday, her back ached and her hands were blistered, but there was also a sense of satisfaction in seeing tangible results from her labor. The garden soil was turned and ready for planting, the washing flapped on the line, and a stew simmered for the evening meal. As she worked, she caught occasional glimpses of Lukas and his men in the distance, mending fences, moving cattle, always in motion. The physical demands of ranch life were evident in the way he moved with purpose and economy, no motion wasted. Late in the afternoon, as Abigail was hanging the last of the linens, a rider approached from the direction of town. Ellie emerged from the house, shading her eyes. "That's Mr. Daniels from the bank," she said, her voice tense. "He never brings good news." Abigail watched as the banker dismounted and spoke briefly with Lukas, who had intercepted him before he reached the house. Even from a distance, she could see Lukas's shoulders stiffen as they conversed. When the banker rode away, Lukas stood motionless for a long moment before walking slowly toward the house. "Bad news?" Abigail asked when he reached them. Lukas glanced at Ellie, clearly reluctant to speak in front of his daughter. "I'm not a child anymore, Pa," Ellie said quietly. "If it's about the loan, I already know." Lukas sighed heavily. "The bank's called in our note. We have 30 days to pay it off or they'll foreclose." "How much?" Abigail asked before she could stop herself. $500. Lukas's voice was flat. "Plus interest." An enormous sum, especially for a cash-strapped ranch. Abigail thought of the $300 sewn into the lining of her trunk, her entire life savings, meant to start her new life or serve as an escape fund if needed. "Can you sell some cattle?" she suggested. "Not enough ready for market," Lukas explained, "and prices are down anyway. I could sell some land, but—" "No," Ellie protested. "This land is our future. There has to be another way. I'll figure something out, Lukas assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. Don't worry yourself about it. But the worry was evident in his eyes as he turned away, and Abigail felt a strange tightening in her chest at the thought of this proud man losing everything he'd built. That evening, after Ellie had gone to bed, Abigail found Lukas sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the darkened landscape. "May I join you?" she asked softly. He moved over, making space beside him. "I apologize for the drama today. Not exactly the welcome I'd planned for you." "Life rarely goes according to plan," she observed, settling beside him. "Mr. Quinn, Lukas, there's something I need to tell you." He turned to her, his face half shadowed in the moonlight. "That sounds serious." Abigail took a deep breath. "When I arrived yesterday, I was planning to leave immediately. I'd changed my mind about becoming a mail-order bride." His expression remained carefully neutral. "I see, and now I'm less certain." She clasped her hands in her lap. "Your daughter convinced me to stay, at least for a short while. She's quite persuasive." A small smile touched his lips. "She gets that from her mother." Then, more soberly, "Why did you change your mind, if I may ask?" "Fear, mostly," Abigail admitted. "The reality of leaving everything I knew, coming to a strange place, marrying a man I'd only exchanged letters with. It overwhelmed me." "That's understandable." His voice held no judgment. "This isn't an easy life, even for those born to it." "I've never shied away from hard work," she assured him. "But it's not just the physical demands, it's the commitment, the permanence." Lukas nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, and I understand if you want to leave. The stagecoach comes through town every Tuesday and Friday. I'll have Ellie drive you in whenever you're ready." His quiet acceptance only made Abigail's conflict deeper. "I'd like to stay a week, if that's all right, to be sure of my decision one way or the other." "Of course. You're welcome here as long as you like, no strings attached." He stood, offering her his hand. "And Abigail, thank you for telling me the truth." His hand was warm around hers as he helped her up, and for a brief moment they stood close enough that she could smell the leather and sage scent of him. Then he stepped back, tipping his hat slightly. "Good night," he said softly, and disappeared into the house, leaving Abigail alone with the vast night sky and her increasingly complicated feelings. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Abigail rose early, helping Ellie with breakfast before the men went out. Then the two of them tackled the accumulated neglect of the house, mending curtains, scrubbing floors, reorganizing the pantry. In the afternoons, Abigail often worked in the garden, which she'd ambitious plans for, while Ellie attended to her studies. Lukas had insisted his daughter continue her education, and she worked through lessons from books ordered from Denver. Lukas himself was a constant presence at the periphery of Abigail's awareness. She caught glimpses of him throughout the day, riding out with the hands at dawn, repairing the barn roof in the afternoon sun, his silhouette outlined against the sunset as he checked the perimeter before nightfall. Each evening they would sit together after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes companionably silent. Abigail learned more about the ranch's history, the challenges of cattle raising in Colorado, the rhythms of the seasons in this high, dry country. In turn, she shared stories of Boston, the theater performances she'd occasionally splurged on, the changing fashions, the political movements brewing in the eastern cities. What she didn't speak of was her growing attraction to Lukas. There was something magnetic about his quiet strength, his obvious love for his daughter and his land, the intelligence behind his practical exterior. She found herself watching the way his hands moved as he demonstrated how to repair a broken chair, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at one of Miguel's jokes, the gentleness with which he treated the orphaned lamb Ellie had adopted. But the shadow of the bank loan hung over everything. Though Lukas rarely mentioned it, Abigail could see the worry etching deeper lines around his eyes as the days passed. Once, she overheard him discussing options with Aaron, selling off the small herd of horses he'd been breeding, mortgaging the eastern pasture, even taking on debt from the local mercantile at exorbitant interest. On her fourth day at the ranch, while helping Ellie mend shirts, Abigail broached the subject. "Has your father considered taking on a partner, someone who could invest in the ranch?" Ellie's needle paused mid-stitch. "He's too proud for that. This land has been Quinn land since before I was born. He wouldn't want to share it, even if it meant saving it, especially then." Ellie resumed her sewing. "Pa believes a man should stand on his own 2 feet. It's why he's worked himself half to death since Ma died rather than asking for help." Abigail considered this. "What about you? What do you want for the future of the ranch?" Ellie looked up, surprised by the question. "Me, I want." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I want it to thrive, not just survive. I want to see the house full again with laughter and maybe more children someday." She blushed. "Not that I expect you to, I mean if you stay, which you might not. I understand," Abigail said gently. "You want your home to be happy again." "Yes." Ellie's voice was small. "And I want Pa to stop looking so tired all the time." Abigail's heart ached for the young girl who carried such adult concerns. "You've been very brave, Ellie, taking care of him and the house." "I had to be," she said simply. "There wasn't anyone else." That night, unable to sleep, Abigail made a decision. She retrieved her trunk from beneath the bed and carefully opened the hidden compartment where her savings were stored. $300 wouldn't cover the entire loan, but it would buy time enough, perhaps, for Lukas to sell cattle at better prices later in the season. But how to offer it without wounding his pride? She couldn't simply present it as charity. From what she knew of Lukas Quinn, he would refuse outright. No, she needed a different approach. The opportunity came the next morning. Lukas was preparing to ride into Concord to speak with the banker again, a last-ditch effort to negotiate an extension. "Mr. Quinn," Abigail said, catching him as he saddled his horse. "I have a business proposition for you." He turned, surprise evident on his face. "A business proposition?" "Yes." She straightened her shoulders. "I'd like to invest in your ranch, $300 in exchange for a small share of the operation." His expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "That's very generous, Miss Oliver, but I can't accept. This isn't your burden to bear." "It's not charity," she insisted. "It's an investment. I believe in the potential of this place." And she realized, saying it, that it was true. The garden alone could produce enough vegetables to sell in town. And with some improvements to the house, you could take in travelers for additional income. Lukas studied her face for a long moment. "Why would you do this? You haven't even decided if you're staying." "Because I believe in what you're building here," she said simply. "Whether I stay or go, this ranch deserves a chance to flourish. And Ellie deserves to keep her home." At the mention of his daughter, something in Lukas's expression softened. $300. It's a substantial sum. I couldn't guarantee returns anytime soon." "I understand the risks," Abigail assured him. "I'm not asking for quick profits, just a fair partnership." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of deep thought. "I'd need to draw up proper papers, make everything official." Hope surged within her. "Then you'll consider it." "I'll do more than consider it," he said slowly. "I'll accept with one condition." "Which is?" "That you'll stay the full week before making any final decisions about your future here." His eyes held hers. "I want you to be certain, Abigail, whatever you choose." The sound of her given name on his lips sent a shiver through her. "I can agree to that." They shook hands, the contact lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary, and Abigail felt a curious sense of rightness in the gesture, as though this agreement were a beginning rather than a temporary arrangement. When Lukas returned from town that evening, his mood was lighter than it had been in days. The banker had agreed to accept the partial payment and extend the terms on the remainder, provided certain benchmarks were met in the coming months. "We still have a hard road ahead," he told Abigail as they sat on the porch after dinner, "but at least now we have a fighting chance." "I'm glad," she said sincerely. "This land deserves someone who cares for it as you do." He looked out over the darkening landscape, his profile strong against the fading light. "My father used to say that land doesn't belong to us, we belong to it, that our job is to be worthy of it. Is that why you fight so hard to keep it?" "Partly." He turned to face her, "but mostly for Ellie. This is her heritage, her birthright. I don't want her to lose that." "She's lucky to have you," Abigail said softly, "to care so deeply for her future." A shadow crossed his face. "I haven't done right by her these past years. Too focused on the ranch, not enough on her needs. She's had to grow up too fast." "Children are resilient," Abigail offered, "and she adores you, that much is obvious." "She needs more than just a father's love," Lukas said quietly. "She needs a woman's guidance, especially now that she's becoming a young lady." He hesitated. "That's why your arrival, even if temporary, has been such a blessing. You've given her something I couldn't." The simple admission touched Abigail deeply. "She's a remarkable girl. You've raised her well despite the challenges." They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared, neither feeling the need to fill the quiet with words. Later, Abigail would recall this as the moment she first truly considered staying, not out of obligation or practicality, but because something in her heart had begun to feel at home. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. With the immediate threat of foreclosure removed, the mood at the ranch lightened considerably. Lukas initiated several projects that had been postponed due to financial constraints, including repairs to the barn roof and clearing a new area for expanded gardens. Abigail threw herself into the work, helping where she could and learning constantly. Ellie proved an enthusiastic teacher, showing Abigail how to churn butter, preserve meat, and identify the wild herbs that grew along the creek banks. In turn, Abigail shared her knowledge of bookkeeping and organization, helping Ellie create a more efficient system for tracking the ranch's expenses and income. "You're good with numbers," Lukas commented one evening, reviewing the ledger they'd created. "My father taught me," Abigail explained. "He believed girls should understand business matters as well as boys do. A progressive thinker." There was approval in his tone. "Ellie has that same aptitude. Sometimes I think she understands the ranch finances better than I do." "She's observant," Abigail agreed. "And deeply invested in this place. As are you, it seems," he noted, watching her face. "You've accomplished more in a week than most could in a month." Abigail felt herself blush under his gaze. "It gives me satisfaction to see improvements, to know I've contributed something lasting." "And is that important to you? Leaving something lasting?" The question resonated deeply. In Boston, despite years of labor, she'd left no mark, just one more factory girl, easily replaced. Here, every task completed, every problem solved was visible and valued. "Yes," she said simply. "I think it is." The week Abigail had promised herself was drawing to a close. Tomorrow would mark 7 days since her arrival, and she still hadn't given Lukas her final answer. Part of her was ready to commit to this new life, the part that had come to love the vast open skies, the rhythm of ranch life, the satisfaction of work that mattered, and the part that found her thoughts increasingly occupied by Lukas himself. But another part still harbored doubts. Could she truly adapt to this isolated existence? Was she prepared for the hardships of frontier life? And most troubling, could she enter into a marriage with a man she barely knew, regardless of how drawn she felt to him? On her final evening of indecision, a spring storm rolled in, bringing much-needed rain and forcing everyone indoors. After dinner, Ellie excused herself early, claiming fatigue but giving Abigail a meaningful glance that suggested her retreat was strategic rather than necessary. Left alone with Lukas, Abigail felt a nervous anticipation build within her. They sat before the fireplace, the only sound the crackling of flames and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. "Your week is up tomorrow," Lukas said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. Abigail nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes. Have you made your decision?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the tension in his jaw. "I'm still." She paused, searching for the right words. "I'm torn." He nodded slowly. "I understand. It's a significant choice with lifelong consequences." He leaned forward, firelight playing across his features. "Abigail, I want you to know something. When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for a practical arrangement, someone to help with the house, be a mother to Ellie, a partner in the ranch. And now," she asked softly, "now I find myself hoping for more than practicality." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "This past week has shown me what's been missing here, beyond just a woman's touch on the house. There's been laughter again, music, conversations that don't revolve solely around cattle prices and weather patterns." Abigail's heart quickened. "Lukas, I'm not asking for love," he continued. "Not yet. That would be presumptuous. But I am asking for a chance for us to see if something deeper might grow between us, given time." The raw honesty in his voice moved her. "I've felt it too," she admitted. "This connection. But I'm afraid of making a mistake, of committing to something I can't fulfill." "What is it that frightens you most?" he asked gently. Abigail considered the question carefully. Failing Ellie, who needs stability. Failing you, who deserves a true partner. Failing myself, by choosing a path that ultimately isn't right for me." Lukas reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "Failure is always a risk in any endeavor worth pursuing, but consider this: in Boston you were surviving. Here you could thrive." His words resonated with a truth she'd been feeling but couldn't articulate: the difference between mere existence and truly living. "I need you to know," she said slowly, "that if I stay, it would be as your equal. I may not know everything about ranching, but I bring my own strengths, my own value." "I would expect nothing less," he assured her, a smile warming his eyes. "This would be a true partnership, Abigail, your voice equal to mine in all decisions." Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling around the eaves of the house. But inside, in the circle of warmth created by the fire and their linked hands, Abigail felt a sense of peace settle over her. "I'll stay," she said finally, her decision crystallizing in that moment. "Not just for a week or a month, but to build a life here, with you and Ellie." The relief and joy that transformed Lukas's face told her everything she needed to know about his feelings. "You won't regret it," he promised, squeezing her hand. "We'll face whatever comes together." "Including the bank loans," she teased gently. "Especially those," he agreed with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, "Abigail, I know this isn't the conventional way of things. We've had no courtship, no time to truly know each other. But I promise you this: I will strive every day to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me." Moved by his sincerity, Abigail found herself leaning toward him. Lukas hesitated only a moment before closing the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle yet charged with promise. His hand came up to cup her face, and Abigail felt herself responding with a warmth that surprised her in its intensity. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Lukas rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably speak to Reverend Thomas in town," he murmured, "about performing a ceremony." Abigail smiled. "That would be appropriate, I think." He kissed her once more, briefly but tenderly, before rising to add another log to the fire. As he moved about the room, Abigail watched him with a growing certainty that she had made the right choice. This man, this place, they offered something her life in Boston never could, a genuine chance at happiness. The news of their impending marriage was met with unrestrained joy from Ellie the next morning. "I knew it," she exclaimed, hugging Abigail fiercely. "I knew you belonged here." "You might have mentioned that to me earlier," Abigail teased. "Could have saved me a week of indecision." "Some things you have to figure out for yourself," Ellie said with surprising wisdom. Then, more practically, "When's the wedding? Can I help plan it? Will you wear Ma's dress?" "It's packed away, but I know where it is." Lukas laid a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Slow down, Ellie girl. Give Abigail a chance to breathe." But Abigail found she didn't mind the girl's enthusiasm. "I'd be honored to wear your mother's dress if it fits and you're truly comfortable with that." Ellie nodded eagerly. She would have wanted it. She always said beautiful things should be used, not stored away. "A wise woman," Abigail observed, exchanging a warm glance with Lukas. She raised an equally wise daughter. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparations. Word spread throughout the small community of Concord, and neighbors began appearing at the ranch, bearing gifts and offers of help. Abigail was touched by the warmth of her reception, these frontier families, who had so little to spare, generously sharing what they had to welcome her. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch brought preserves and offered to help with alterations to Catherine's wedding dress. The blacksmith's wife organized a group of women to prepare food for the celebration. Even Mr. Daniels from the bank arrived with a fine tablecloth his wife had made as a wedding present, along with assurances that the revised loan terms would be formalized after the ceremony. Through it all, Abigail found her bond with Lukas deepening. Their evenings together were filled with conversations about their hopes for the future, expanding the ranch's operations, improving the house, perhaps adding a proper schoolroom for Ellie and other children in the area. They discovered shared values and complementary strengths, and though they occasionally disagreed, these differences seemed to enhance rather than diminish their connection. As for Ellie, she blossomed under Abigail's attention. Together, they retrieved Catherine's wedding dress from its cedar chest, a simple but elegant gown of ivory silk with delicate lace trim. As they carefully aired it out, Ellie shared stories of her mother, her love of music, her skill with horses, the bedtime stories she'd invented featuring a brave girl who could talk to animals. "She would have liked you," Ellie said confidently as they worked on the minor alterations the dress needed. "You're different from her, but in good ways. She always said a ranch needs all kinds of strengths to thrive." "I wish I could have known her," Abigail said sincerely. "She sounds remarkable." She was. Ellie's hand stilled on the fabric. "I'm not trying to replace her, with you." Abigail covered the girl's hand with her own. "I would never presume to take her place in your heart, Ellie, but I hope there's room for me too in my own way." Ellie's smile was answer enough. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, a perfect late May morning. The ceremony was to be held at the ranch, under the large cottonwood tree by the creek where, Lukas had told her, he and Catherine had once pledged their own vows. Abigail stood in her small room, Catherine's dress flowing around her, as Mrs. Henderson pinned wildflowers in her hair. Through the window, She could see guests arriving, families from neighboring ranches, townsfolk from Concord, even a group of Ute Indians with whom Lukas maintained friendly relations. "Nervous?" Mrs. Henderson asked kindly. "Strangely, no," Abigail replied, realizing it was true. "It feels right. Like I've found where I'm supposed to be." A soft knock at the door announced Ellie, resplendent in a new blue dress Abigail had helped her make. "Pa's waiting," she said, her eyes widening as she took in Abigail's appearance. "You look beautiful." "As do you," Abigail said warmly, extending her hand. "Shall we?" With Ellie at her side, Abigail emerged from the house to find the gathered community parting to create a path to the cottonwood tree, where Lukas and Reverend Thomas awaited. Lukas had clearly made an effort with his appearance, his usually practical clothes replaced by a proper suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. But it was the expression in his eyes as he watched her approach that truly took Abigail's breath away, a mixture of awe, tenderness, and unmistakable love that made her heart swell with answering emotion. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish one another through all of life's joys and challenges. When Reverend Thomas invited Lukas to kiss his bride, a cheer went up from the assembled guests, none louder than Ellie's delighted whoop. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by neighbors. A fiddler and guitarist provided music for dancing, and as the sun began to set, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Abigail found herself passed from one neighbor to another, welcomed with genuine warmth into the tight-knit community. Mrs. Peterson from the general store promised to order fabric samples from Denver. The doctor's wife invited her to join a quilting circle that met monthly. The school teacher sought her input on expanding the small library in town. Throughout it all, Lukas remained close, his hand often finding hers, his eyes seeking her out across the gathering. During a moment of relative quiet, as they stood slightly apart from the celebration, watching Ellie dance with Miguel, he leaned in to whisper, "Happy?" "Very," she assured him, leaning into his solid presence. "I never imagined this is where that stage coach would lead me." "Funny how life works out," he mused. "If you'd left that first day as you planned." "But I didn't," she reminded him. "Thanks to a very persuasive young lady who said you needed me anyway." Lukas's gaze shifted to his daughter, his expression softening. "She was right, though not in the way she meant it. I did need you not just to help with the ranch or be a mother to Ellie, but to remind me there's more to life than just surviving from one season to the next." Abigail's heart filled with emotion. "I needed you too, Lukas. To show me what it means to build something meaningful, to truly belong somewhere." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn." The name, her new identity, settled around her like a comfortable cloak. "Home," she repeated, the word filled with promise. "I like the sound of that." As the evening deepened into night, the guests gradually departed, calling out final congratulations and well wishes. Ellie, exhausted but happy, had been persuaded to retire after extracting promises from both Abigail and Lukas that they would tell her everything about their planned improvements to the house and garden in the morning. Finally, alone, they walked hand in hand toward the creek, where the rushing water provided a soothing counterpoint to the lingering sounds of celebration being cleared away by helpful neighbors. "I have something for you," Lukas said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He pressed a small object into her palm, a simple gold band with a delicate pattern etched around it. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I've been saving it. I thought perhaps as a wedding band." Abigail examined it in the moonlight, touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful." "Like you," he said simply, taking it back and sliding it onto her finger alongside the plain band used in the ceremony. A perfect fit. Their kiss was deeper this time, unobserved by community eyes, filled with the promise of the night to come and the shared life stretching before them. When they finally broke apart breathless, Lukas rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he admitted. "When I wrote that advertisement, I was looking for a practical arrangement. Instead, I found love," Abigail suggested softly. His smile was answer enough. Taking her hand, he led her back toward the house, their home, and the beginning of their life together. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and growth for the newly formed family. Summer brought long, sun-drenched days of activity tending the expanded gardens that now flourished under Abigail's care, moving cattle to higher pastures, making repairs to the house that had been postponed for too long. Abigail found herself adapting to ranch life more easily than she'd anticipated. The physical demands were considerable, but there was satisfaction in collapsing into bed each night, muscles pleasantly tired from honest work. And there was Lukas, whose strength and tenderness made those nights something to anticipate rather than merely endure. Their partnership, both in business and in life, proved surprisingly harmonious. Abigail's organizational skills and head for figures complemented Lukas's practical knowledge and experience. Under their combined management, the ranch began to show signs of true prosperity for the first time in years. The garden produced enough vegetables not only for their own use, but to sell in town. Abigail began experimenting with preserves and pickles, creating distinctive recipes that quickly gained popularity at the general store. These small but steady streams of income helped ease the financial pressure, allowing Lukas to focus on long-term improvements to the ranch rather than merely keeping creditors at bay. Ellie thrived under the new arrangement, blossoming in the stability of a complete family. She and Abigail developed rituals of their own, reading together in the evenings, experimenting with new recipes, working side by side in the garden. The girls' education continued, with Abigail supplementing her book, learning with practical skills in household management and business affairs. By late summer, another change was evident. Abigail's dresses needed letting out, and a telltale roundness began to appear at her waistline. When she shared the news with Lukas, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for: joy mingled with protective concern, his hand reverently covering the place where their child grew. "Are you happy about this?" he asked, studying her face. "It's soon, I know." Abigail smiled, covering his hand with her own. "I am. Nervous, of course, but yes, very happy." Ellie's response to the news was equally enthusiastic. "A brother or sister," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. "I've always wanted siblings." "You'll be a wonderful big sister," Abigail assured her, touched by the girl's excitement. As Abigail's pregnancy progressed, the bond between her and Ellie deepened further. The girl peppered her with questions about the baby, offered to take on additional chores to spare Abigail exertion, and even began crafting a small quilt for the new arrival. "Ma would be glad," Ellie confided one evening as they sat on the porch, shelling peas while watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "That Pa found you, I mean, that he's happy again." "I think she would be proud of you," Abigail replied gently. "Of how you've cared for him in this home." Ellie was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on her work. "Sometimes I worry that I'll forget her. It's been 4 years now, and sometimes I can't quite remember the sound of her voice." Abigail put down her bowl, reaching out to cover Ellie's hand with her own. "That's natural, but it doesn't mean you're forgetting her. She'll always be part of you, Ellie, and part of this place. Will you tell the baby about her? Ellie asked, her voice small. Of course we will, Abigail promised. Your mother will always have a place in this family's story. Ellie nodded, satisfied, and they returned to their work in companionable silence as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Autumn brought the cattle drive a busy, chaotic time as the herd was rounded up and driven to the railhead for shipping to eastern markets. Lukas was often gone from dawn until well after dark, returning exhausted but satisfied as the profit from the cattle sales exceeded expectations. With the money, they were able to pay off the remainder of the bank loan ahead of schedule and still have funds left for improvements. A proper bathroom was added to the house, with a pump bringing water directly inside, a luxury Abigail appreciated more with each passing month as her pregnancy advanced. Winter arrived early that year, with the first heavy snow falling before Thanksgiving. The ranch settled into the quieter rhythm of the cold months, mending equipment, caring for the animals kept close to the barns, preserving the last of the autumn harvest, and preparing for the spring calving season that would begin as the snow retreated. Christmas was a particularly special celebration. The house was decorated with pine boughs and red berries, and Abigail insisted on maintaining some of the traditions from her Eastern upbringing. Stockings hung by the fireplace, special cookies baked from her mother's recipes, carols sung around the piano that Lukas had surprised her with, purchased from a family leaving the territory. On Christmas morning, as they exchanged modest but thoughtful gifts, Abigail was struck by how completely her life had transformed in less than a year. Last Christmas, she had been alone in a crowded tenement, working extra hours at the factory to earn a few additional coins. Now she sat in a home filled with warmth and love, a husband beside her, a daughter who had claimed a place in her heart, and a child growing beneath her heart. "What are you thinking?" Lukas asked, noticing her momentary stillness. Abigail smiled, taking his hand. "That I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." The baby arrived in late February, during a rare, mild spell between winter storms. After a labor that lasted through the night and into the following day, Lukas Quinn made his entrance into the world, a healthy, robust boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. Lukas, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door during the delivery, attended only by Mrs. Henderson, and Ellie was overwhelmed at the sight of his son. "He's perfect," he whispered, cradling the tiny form with careful hands that regularly managed 2,000-pound bulls. Just like his mother. Abigail, exhausted but radiant, watched the tenderness with which Lukas held their child. "I think he has your stubborn chin," she teased. Ellie, allowed in to meet her brother, approached the bed with awe on her face. "He's so small," she marveled, reaching out a cautious finger to touch the baby's hand. Andrew reflexively grasped it, and Ellie's expression transformed with wonder. "He knows me." "Of course he does," Abigail assured her. "He's been listening to your voice for months." The first weeks with the new baby were a blur of interrupted nights and adjusting routines, but the household adapted with surprising ease. Lukas proved an attentive father, often taking Andrew for early morning walks around the house when the baby was fussy, allowing Abigail precious extra hours of sleep. Ellie appointed herself official assistant, eager to help with everything from bathing to laundry. By spring, with its explosion of new growth and activity, Abigail had regained her strength and found a new rhythm that allowed her to balance motherhood with her other responsibilities. The garden was expanded again, with plans to sell even more produce in town. Lukas, encouraged by their successful cattle sale the previous fall, purchased additional breeding stock to improve the herd's quality. The ranch, which had seemed on the brink of failure when Abigail arrived, was now thriving not just financially, but as a home filled with purpose and joy. On the anniversary of her arrival in Concord, Lukas surprised Abigail with a picnic by the creek, baby Andrew sleeping peacefully in a basket beside them, Ellie happily fishing a short distance away. "Happy anniversary," he said, pouring her a glass of cider from a stone jug. Abigail accepted it with a smile. "Is that what today is? The day the mail-order bride who changed her mind was persuaded to stay anyway. The day our real life began," he corrected, his expression warm. "Though I have to admit, when I saw your face as you stepped off that stagecoach, I knew immediately you were having second thoughts." "Was I that obvious?" she asked, chagrined, only to someone who was watching very carefully. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I was definitely watching carefully. You were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and you looked absolutely terrified." Abigail laughed. "I was. Everything seemed so vast, so different from Boston. I was sure I'd made a horrible mistake. And now—" His eyes held hers, still seeking reassurance despite the year of happiness they'd shared. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made," she said softly, "even if I needed a little persuasion from a very wise young lady." They both glanced toward Ellie, who had abandoned her fishing to wade in the shallows of the creek, her skirts hitched up to her knees, her face alight with the simple pleasure of cool water on a warm day. "She saved us both," Lukas acknowledged. "When she said we need you anyway, she had no idea how true that was." "She's extraordinary," Abigail agreed. "You raised her well, even before I came along." "We're raising her together now," he pointed out, "along with this little fellow." He reached over to adjust the blanket around Andrew, who slept on, oblivious to the conversation about his future. As the afternoon stretched lazily before them, Abigail found herself reflecting on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened factory girl to a confident ranch wife and mother, from a stranger in a strange land to a woman firmly rooted in her community and family. "What are you thinking about?" Lukas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About journeys," she replied. "And how the most important ones aren't measured in miles traveled, but in how far your heart has come." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "A year ago, I wouldn't have believed I could be this happy again. After Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. And now—" His smile was answer enough, but he elaborated. "Now I know that life is full of second chances if you're brave enough to take them." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the land they both had come to love, Lukas leaned over to kiss her, a gesture that still sent a thrill through Abigail, even after a year of marriage. "Thank you," he murmured against her lips. "For what?" "For changing your mind, for staying, for everything that's followed." Abigail smiled, thinking of all the moments that had led to this one, the fear that had nearly sent her fleeing back east, Ellie's determined insistence that they needed her anyway, the gradual building of trust and love between herself and Lukas, and now this family they had created together. "I'm the one who should be thankful," she said softly, "for finding a place and people to belong to." From the creek bank, Ellie called out excitedly, having caught a small trout. Andrew stirred in his basket, making the little snuffling noises that preceded waking. And Lukas, her husband, gazed at her with eyes full of a love that still sometimes took her breath away. This was her life now, not the one she had planned when she boarded that stagecoach a year ago, but infinitely better. A life built on choices made and challenges faced together, on land that demanded much but gave back more, with people who had become the center of her world. The mail-order bride who had changed her mind had found something far more valuable than she had ever imagined possible. Not just a home, but a place where her heart could truly flourish. And as the family gathered their picnic things and headed back toward the ranch house, silhouetted against the setting sun, Abigail knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years later, when asked by newcomers to concord how she and Lukas had met, Abigail would smile and say simply, "I came west as a mail-order bride, changed my mind, and stayed anyway." The full story, with its doubts and fears, its moments of decision and connection, remained a cherished private narrative, woven into the fabric of their shared life. The Quinn Ranch continued to prosper under their joint stewardship. Andrew was joined by two more siblings over the years, a sister, Catherine, named for Lukas's first wife, and another boy, Benjamin, who arrived somewhat unexpectedly when Abigail was nearly 40. Ellie grew into a capable young woman who eventually married Miguel, Lukas's loyal ranch hand. They built their own home on the eastern section of the ranch, continuing the family legacy while adding their own chapters to its story. And Lukas and Abigail, partners in every sense, watched their family and their land flourish, secure in the knowledge that their unlikely beginning had led to precisely the life they were meant to live together, on the land they both had come to love, surrounded by the family they had built, one decision at a time.